The vast expanse of Chicago O'Hare International Airport hummed with the controlled chaos of travel. Sunlight streamed through the massive windows of Terminal 1, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air above, crowds navigating the labyrinth of gates, shops, and moving walkways. Departure boards flickered with destinations spanning the globe, a testament to the city's status as a major crossroads. Amidst this bustling ecosystem, digital screens displayed glossy advertisements for Summit Air, the airline's tagline, "Reach your peak with us," glowing invitingly. The images promised seamless journeys and attentive service, yet the reality on the ground often painted a different picture. Near the sprawling economy, check-in counters lines snaked back, filled with weary travelers juggling bags, children, and the anxieties of air travel. Patients frayed easily amidst delays and unexpected fees. In stark contrast, the Summit Air first-class check-in area radiated exclusivity, polished chrome plush carpets, and dedicated attendants offering placid smiles created an oasis of calm. It was here, blending unobtrusively with the diverse river of people flowing through the terminal, stood Elias Vance. Dressed in simple dark jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and worn leather boots, with a nondescript backpack slung over one shoulder, he looked like any other traveler trying to navigate the airport's currents. Few, if any, would guess he was the founder and majority owner of Summit Air, a man whose quiet determination had built an empire from scratch, challenging expectations at every turn. Today. However, Elias wasn't the CEO. He was merely a passenger, observing his creation from the ground level. His sharp eyes took in the scene, a young family struggling with oversized luggage being met with curt impatience by a gate agent. A group of students excitedly chattering, only to be hushed dismissively by a passing airline employee. These weren't isolated incidents. They were whispers of a culture diverging from the one he envisioned. He approached the gleaming first-class counter. Behind it stood Eleanor Sterling, her uniform immaculate, her blonde hair pulled back severely. Professionalism radiated from her posture, but a subtle tightness around her lips hinted at a practiced rather than genuine warmth. Elias handed over his ticket and ID. Eleanor's eyes briefly flickered over his attire, a micro-expression of surprise, perhaps disdain quickly masked by a brittle smile. "Are you certain this is the correct line, sir?" she asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "Quite certain," Elias replied evenly. She took his ID, examining it with unnecessary scrutiny before turning to her computer. Her fingers tapped deliberately slowly on the keyboard. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the clicking nails. "This booking appears unusual," she murmured, loud enough for nearby passengers in tailored suits to overhear. "I'll need to verify this with a supervisor," Elias controlled his rising irritation. "There's nothing unusual about it. It's a confirmed booking. First-class seat, 1A. Eleanor merely raised an eyebrow and picked up the phone, speaking softly into the receiver. Minutes crawled by. Finally, Arthur Finch, Summit Air's ORD operations manager, arrived. Tall, impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit, he exuded an air of smooth authority, mixed with palpable arrogance. "Is there a problem here?" Arthur asked, his gaze sliding from Eleanor to Elias, lingering assessingly on Elias's casual clothes. "Mr. Finch," Eleanor began deferentially, "I just needed confirmation on this gentleman's ticket. It seemed out of place for this counter." Arthur gave Elias a cursory glance. "Everything appears to be in order," he said, handing the ticket back to Eleanor with a nod that felt dismissive. "Please expedite this." He offered Elias a brief, formal handshake. "Enjoy your flight." The words were smooth, but lacked any genuine welcome. As Elias walked towards the gate, the encounter weighed on him. It wasn't just poor service. It was a symptom of a deeper malaise, a culture that judged worth by appearance, reinforced by management's indifference. This was not the Summit Air he had poured his life into building. Boarding the aircraft, Elias settled into the spacious cocoon of his first-class seat. The plush leather and attentive pre-departure service felt hollow after the check-in experience. He watched Eleanor move through the cabin, her smile now genuine, as she interacted effusively with passengers who fit her apparent mold of importance, like the man in the adjacent row, Mr. Harrison, whose expensive watch glinted under the cabin lights. When Mr. Harrison snapped his fingers, Eleanor was instantly at his side, taking his order for champagne and almonds with warm deference. She lingered chatting about his business trip, her laughter mingling with his. Later, Elias politely caught Eleanor's eye. She approached, her expression hardening slightly. "Yes, I'd like a glass of water, please," Elias requested calmly. "I'll get that for you shortly," she replied before turning to assist another passenger with a blanket, then disappearing into the galley. Several minutes passed. When she finally returned, she placed the water on his tray table with a curt nod, and no further word, immediately walking away. Across the aisle, a woman draped in pearls glanced at Elias, her expression a mixture of curiosity and judgment, clearly wondering how he'd ended up in first class. Elias took a slow breath, refusing to be outwardly affected, but the accumulation of slights was building a quiet storm within him. His airline, built on the promise of respect for all, was failing that promise right before his eyes. A softer voice interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me, sir. Is there anything else you need?" It was Maya Chen, a younger flight attendant whose smile seemed genuine, her demeanor warm and attentive. "No, thank you, I'm fine," Elias replied, his tone softening. Maya paused. "If you need anything at all, please just let me know." As she moved away, Elias observed her interactions, efficient, kind, and consistent regardless of the passenger's perceived status. Later, when Maya passed again, Elias gestured her over. "May I ask you something?" "Of course," she replied, her expression open. "You handle things differently," Elias said carefully. "More attentively than some." Maya glanced around subtly. "It's not always easy," she admitted quietly. "There's a lot of pressure, especially under management like Mr. Finch. He has his favorites if you're not one of them." She trailed off, but the implication was clear. "You were expendable," her words struck Elias. This wasn't just individual bias, it was systemic, fostered by leadership. "Thank you for your honesty, Maya. I just try to do the job right," she murmured with a faint, grateful smile. "Some of us still believe in what this airline is supposed to stand for." As the plane soared westward toward Seattle, Elias stared out at the clouds. Maya's words confirmed his fears. The problem wasn't just a few bad apples. It stemmed from the top. His trip was no longer just about observation. It was about intervention. Meal service began. Elias watched as Eleanor approached his row. "Your entree," she stated, placing a plate before him with minimal care. It was chicken. He had pre-ordered the steak. "This isn't what I ordered," Elias said calmly. Eleanor barely glanced down. "We ran out of the steak option. This is what we have." Her tone was final. "Could you please check again? I confirmed my preference during booking." Eleanor sighed audibly. "Sir, like I said, we are out." She turned and walked away, leaving Elias with the unwanted meal. He saw Maya glance his way, concern on her face, but she hesitated, likely wary of provoking Eleanor. Later, Elias overheard Eleanor in the galley, her voice sharp as she instructed a junior attendant. "I don't care if he's upset. Just get through the service." Her management style was abrasive, and the younger crew members seemed visibly tense under her command. When she directed a harsh comment towards Maya, "Chen, you're taking too long," Maya simply replied evenly, "I'm ensuring the passengers' requests are met properly, Eleanor." Eleanor rolled her eyes and moved on. Discreetly, Elias pulled out a small notebook, jotting down observations. Every dismissive glance, every curt remark, every instance of favoritism painted a picture of dysfunction. When Maya passed again later, she paused. "I'm truly sorry about the meal earlier, sir. Let me see if there's anything else I can find for you." "It's not your fault, Maya," Elias said quietly. "But tell me, is this dynamic normal?" Maya leaned in slightly. "It depends who's supervising the flight. Some leads are great, but others, well, Eleanor takes her cues from Arthur Finch. He rewards a certain type, and that attitude trickles down. This confirmed it. The rot started with Finch, his resolve solidified. This wasn't just about correcting behavior. It was about dismantling a toxic culture. Suddenly, a low commotion came from the direction of the economy cabin. A passenger had reportedly collapsed near the lavatories. Maya hurried past, her expression urgent. Elias saw her kneeling beside an older man who looked pale and unwell. A call for medical assistance went out over the intercom. Elias stood, instincts kicking in. "Anything I can do?" he asked Maya. "We might need more space," she replied, looking worried. "Maybe move him up here." Before Elias could agree, Eleanor arrived, heels clicking. She assessed the situation with a frown. "He stays back there. We can't disrupt the first-class cabin." "But Eleanor, he needs room," Maya protested, "and risk upsetting our premium passengers." Eleanor cut her off sharply. "Handle it there." Elias stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "This man's health is more important than minor disruption. Moving him seems the most sensible action." Eleanor turned to him, her eyes cold. "Sir, we have protocols. Protocols that prioritize appearances over people." Elias countered, his frustration finally showing. Eleanor stiffened, momentarily flustered before regaining her composure and repeating her instruction to Maya. She then walked away. Thankfully, a doctor on board helped stabilize the man, but the incident left a bitter taste. Elias returned to his seat, his decision made. Observation time was over. Action was required. As the plane descended towards Seattle, the city lights sprawling below, Elias felt a grim determination. Once landed and most passengers had deplaned, he approached Eleanor at the door. Her farewell smile was practiced. "I need to speak with Arthur Finch," Elias stated evenly. Eleanor hesitated. "He's quite busy, but I can try to reach him." "Bastian." She moved towards the jet bridge phone, and Elias overheard snippets of her conversation, her tone laced with disdain. "Yes, he's insisting. I don't know what his problem is." Minutes later, Elias was directed to a small, sleek office near the Summit air gates. Arthur Finch sat behind a large desk, the Seattle skyline visible through the window behind him. He gestured for Elias to sit, his professional mask firmly in place, though tinged with impatience. Sorry, I didn't catch your name earlier. Eleanor mentioned you had a concern." "Vance," Elias supplied. "And yes, I observed deeply concerning behavior from your staff on the flight, indicative of a problematic service culture." Arthur leaned back, a tight smile playing on his lips. "Mr. Vance, I assure you, Summit Air upholds the highest standards. Perhaps a minor inconvenience occurred." "It was more than minor," Elias stated. "I witnessed disrespect bullying among staff and a clear prioritization of certain passengers over others, even over basic passenger well-being." Arthur's smile tightened further. "That's a strong accusation. We pride ourselves on our premium service. Perhaps your expectations." "Perhaps the problem," Elias interjected calmly, "is a focus on premium appearances over genuine substance. It creates an environment where only certain people feel valued." For the first time, Arthur's composure slipped slightly. "Well, Mr. Vance," he said, his tone shifting, becoming colder. "Our first-class experience is tailored. Let's be frank, we don't often see individuals, dressed like yourself. In this cabin, we cater to a certain clientele." The prejudice was laid bare, unapologetic. Elias felt a cold anger rise, but kept his voice level. "Individuals like myself," Arthur doubled down, "executives, professionals, people accustomed to a certain level." The implication hung heavy in the air. Elias stood, slowly, his quiet presence suddenly feeling larger in the confined space. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Finch. It's been illuminating." Arthur looked momentarily taken aback. "Problem, Mr. Vance, if you're unhappy, perhaps some flight credits." "I'm not looking for credits," Elias said firmly, turning towards the door. "I'm looking to fix the culture you've allowed to fester." Arthur chuckled, a humorless sound. "I think you overestimate your influence here." Elias paused at the door, looking back. You have no idea who I am, do you? Should I? Arthur asked, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You'll find out, Elias replied before stepping out, leaving Arthur Finch alone in his glass office, unaware of the storm about to break. Back in his Seattle hotel room, Elias bypassed the urge for immediate confrontation. Revealing his identity then would have been satisfying, but less effective. Instead, he called Maya Chen. Maya, it's Elias Vance. I need your help, but it needs to be discreet. After a moment's hesitation, Maya agreed. What do you need? Information about Arthur Finch's management style, how he treats employees, any patterns you've noticed, anything that paints the full picture. Over the next few days, Maya became his discreet eyes and ears within the ORD operation. She relayed stories of overlooked promotions, blatant favoritism, and a climate of fear. He tears people down in meetings, Maya reported in one hushed phone call. No one dares challenge him. She also stumbled upon something more concrete: whispers about questionable payments to a specific third-party vendor closely associated with Finch, risking discovery. Maya managed to photograph several invoices and internal memos left unattended, showing large sums paid for vaguely defined services. When Maya sent the photos, Elias cross-referenced them with internal records he could access remotely. The pattern was undeniable. Finch was funneling company funds through inflated contracts with vendors linked to him personally. It wasn't just toxic leadership, it was corruption. His resolve hardened. Just as he was planning his next move, Maya called again, her voice tense. Elias, I think Eleanor suspects something. She's been watching me, giving me extra tasks. I overheard her talking to Finch about you asking questions. The timeline accelerated. The next day, Elias received an anonymous call from Daniel Cho, a junior manager at ORD. Mr. Vance, I heard you're looking into things, Cho began nervously. Finch, he covers things up, manipulates reports. People know, but they're scared. Why tell me now? Elias asked. Because I'm tired of seeing good people suffer while he profits, Cho admitted. And I heard you might actually be able to do something. That was the final piece. Elias contacted Summit Air's legal and HR departments, initiating a confidential internal audit focused on ORD operations, providing the preliminary evidence. Then he sent out a company-wide summons for an emergency meeting at Summit Air's Chicago headquarters. The agenda was vague, the tone urgent. The main conference room at Summit Air HQ buzzed with nervous energy. Elias entered quietly, taking a seat away from the main table. Unnoticed, Arthur Finch sat at the head, projecting confidence, flanked by other senior managers. Maya Chen sat further down, offering Elias a subtle nod. Finch opened the meeting. I understand there are some operational concerns. Let's hear them. He gestured vaguely towards Elias. You have the floor. Elias rose. Thank you. I've recently spent time observing operations specifically at O'Hare. What I found goes beyond inefficiency. I found a pervasive culture of favoritism, intimidation, and bias. He slid copies of summarized findings onto the table. Finch scoffed. Bias. Strong words. Do you have proof or just anecdotes? I have specifics, Elias replied evenly, tapping a thicker folder. Employee testimonies, records of misconduct, and significant financial discrepancies directly linked to your leadership. Mr. Finch. Finch's smile vanished. Financial discrepancies. This is absurd. A smear campaign by someone who clearly doesn't belong here. He leaned forward, his voice sharp. People like you don't understand the complexities of running an airline this size. The room tensed. People like me? Elias repeated calmly. Finch waved a dismissive hand. Let's not pretend this is about anything other than you trying to cause trouble. Elias took a breath and then walked deliberately to the head of the table. He reached into his pocket and placed a simple, elegant business card directly in front of Arthur Finch. The embossed letters caught the light. Elias Vance, founder and CEO, Summit Air. A collective gasp filled the room. Finch stared at the card, his face draining of color. I built this company from the ground up, Elias stated, his voice resonating with quiet authority. I know exactly what it takes, and I know corruption when I see it. He turned to the room. This isn't about minor grievances. It's about the integrity of Summit Air, founded on respect for everyone. Those principles have been violated. He gestured to the folder he'd brought. Here is the evidence supporting every claim. Financial audits, employee statements. Finch sputtered, speechless. Effective immediately, Elias declared. Arthur Finch is suspended from all duties pending the outcome of a full independent investigation. An external audit team will begin reviewing Orty operations tomorrow. He looked around the room. This company is going to change starting now. We will rebuild the trust that has been broken. Finch, finally finding his voice, rose shakily. You're making a mistake. This company needs me. We'll manage, Elias replied coolly. The systems you put in place are precisely what we intend to dismantle. Defeated and exposed. Arthur Finch grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. A stunned silence lingered, then broke into murmurs. Elias addressed the remaining managers, his tone softening slightly. To those who worked under that culture, change is here. We will be a place where employees are valued and customers respected. He then looked towards Maya. Maya Chen, your integrity and courage have been exceptional. Effective immediately, I'm promoting you to a supervisory position. Your voice is needed in leadership. Maya's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and gratitude washing over her face as quiet applause started around the table. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted. In the following days, the fallout was intense. Finch, though suspended, tried leveraging connections, spreading rumors through sympathetic media contacts and shareholders that Elias's reckless changes were hurting the company. Elias faced a tense virtual meeting with the board of directors. These reforms aren't a liability, Elias argued firmly. They are an investment in our future trust loyalty. These are not line items, but they are the bedrock of sustainable success. Ignoring the rot Finch fostered would have led to collapse. He spoke of his own experiences facing prejudice, reinforcing his commitment. We built this company to be better. I won't compromise that vision. Reluctantly, the board agreed to let the audit and reforms proceed. Elias then held an open forum, broadcast to all employees with media present, laying bare the audited financial records and the evidence against Finch. He addressed the smear campaign head-on with transparency. Mid-presentation. Arthur Finch dramatically entered the hall, flanked by lawyers holding documents. He claimed proved Elias was misusing company funds. More fabrications. Arthur, Elias countered calmly, because I have proof of your attempts to bribe employees into spreading false information traced right back to you. Before Finch could respond, Maya Chen stepped forward to the microphone. I worked under Mr. Finch, she stated clearly, her voice steady despite trembling hands. I saw good people mistreated. Elias Vance is giving us hope. Her words, coupled with the hard evidence Elias presented, swayed the room. A major previously neutral shareholder stood. I've seen enough. I fully support Mr. Vance's reforms. It's time for change. The tide turned definitively isolated and exposed. Finch was formally terminated on the spot. He left the hall in disgrace, met this time not with silence but with applause for his departure. Elias addressed the attendees. Today isn't just about accountability. It's about rebuilding Summit Air will stand for integrity. He announced the Summit for All initiative, reinvesting recovered funds into employee scholarships, improved benefits, and an employee council for ongoing oversight. Weeks later, the Grand Ballroom at Summit Air HQ hosted a celebration launching Summit for All. The atmosphere was electric with renewed optimism. Elias stood observing the crowd, employees, loyal customers, supportive shareholders. Maya, now confidently wearing her supervisor badge, nodded towards the stage. Elias stepped up, the room quieting. Today we celebrate a promise, he began warmly, a promise that people matter. Summit for All isn't just a slogan, it's our commitment. He acknowledged the employees who spoke out, the customers who stayed loyal. Change comes from courage at all levels. That's what Summit Air will always stand for. The applause was heartfelt. As guests mingled afterwards, an older man approached Elias, one of the passengers from that fateful Chicago-Seattle flight. "Mr. Vance," the man said, shaking his hand firmly, "I was on that flight. I saw how you were treated, how you handled it. What you're doing here, it matters, gives folks like me hope." "Thank you," Elias replied, sincerely deeply moved. "That means everything." Later, alone in his office, overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline, Elias felt the weight of responsibility, but also a profound sense of purpose. The journey was far from over, but Summit Air was finally on the right flight path, guided by the values it was founded upon. He looked out at the horizon, a quiet determination settling over him. This was just the beginning. Months melted into a year following the dramatic overhaul at Summit Air. The Summit for All initiative wasn't just a memory of a launch event. It was becoming the airline's operational heartbeat. The changes weren't instantaneous or universal. Ingrained habits die hard, but the cultural tide was undeniably turning. Maya Chen, now firmly established in her supervisory role at O'Hare, found herself navigating new challenges. One afternoon during a busy check-in period, a flustered elderly passenger arrived with luggage slightly over the weight limit. The agent, a newer hire named Ben, started to quote the standard excess baggage fee, his tone hesitant but by the book. Maya stepped over calmly. "Let's see what we can do here," she said, addressing the passenger warmly. After a brief conversation, she learned the passenger was traveling alone to see a sick relative, and the extra items were essential medical supplies. Referencing the newly implemented discretionary guidelines focused on passenger empathy, Maya instructed Ben, "Let's waive the fee this time." "Ben, document it under compassionate grounds. Just ensure the bag is properly tagged for handling." Ben looked relieved, the passenger grateful. As the passenger moved on, Maya spoke quietly to Ben. "Remember, the training policies are important, but so is context. Our goal is to help people reach their destination safely and with dignity." It was a small moment, but it represented thousands like it happening across the company. Decisions guided by empathy rather than rigid fear of reprimand. The Employee Representative Council, once a novelty, was now a powerful forum, comprised of elected members from various departments. Pilots, flight attendants, gate agents, maintenance crew, baggage handlers, they met monthly with senior leadership, including Elias Vance himself, whenever possible. Initially, discussions were tentative, employees still wary after years under Finch's regime. But as their suggestions were genuinely listened to, documented, and often acted upon, trust grew. They tackled thorny issues, refining crew scheduling to reduce burnout, improving communication channels between ground staff and flight crews during delays, even suggesting modifications to the new training programs based on real-world feedback. Elias made a point of attending quarterly, not to dictate, but to listen. He learned about operational friction points he'd never have seen from the executive suite, reinforcing his belief that the true experts were those doing the work every day. Of course, resistance lingered. Some veteran employees grumbled about the touchy-feely new approach or the extra time required for diversity and inclusion training. One senior pilot initially scoffed at the mandatory leadership workshops, believing his decades of experience were sufficient. However, after a co-pilot empowered by the new open-door culture respectfully pointed out how his curt communication style was creating unnecessary stress during pre-flight checks. The veteran pilot grudgingly admitted the training offered some valid points. Change wasn't always comfortable, but the expectation of mutual respect was becoming non-negotiable. Elias, though delegating more operational authority, remained deeply invested. He occasionally still flew commercial, sometimes even in economy. Not undercover this time, but simply as a passenger. He'd chat with gate agents, observe boarding processes, and listen to the ambient conversations around him. He noticed fewer hushed complaints and more casual, friendly interactions between staff and passengers. He saw flight attendants, like Maya, proactively assisting passengers struggling with overhead bins, their actions driven by genuine helpfulness, not just procedure. The external perception of Summit Air began to shift too. While financial recovery took time, investing in training improved benefits, and operational changes had upfront costs. Customer satisfaction scores started a steady climb. Positive mentions on social media increased, often highlighting specific instances of helpful staff or compassionate service that went beyond expectations. Competing airlines, initially dismissive, began taking note of Summit Air's rising reputation for employee morale and customer care. One evening, reviewing the latest internal employee satisfaction survey results, Elias saw a marked improvement across nearly all metrics. Trust in leadership, feeling valued, and perceived fairness had all significantly increased. A comment handwritten at the bottom of one survey caught his eye. "It finally feels like we're all flying in the same direction." Elias leaned back in his chair, a quiet sense of accomplishment washing over him. The crisis spurred by Arthur Finch's corruption had forced a painful reckoning, but it had also catalyzed a return to the airline's founding principles. The work wasn't finished. Maintaining a healthy culture required constant vigilance and commitment, but the foundation was strong. Summit Air was not just surviving, it was learning to soar again, powered not just by its engines, but by the renewed spirit of its people. The horizon ahead looked clearer and decidedly more inclusive for all.